the popularity of socialism has risen so dramatically because we have discredited capitalism by preaching it and not practicing it. All the damage that has been done to the economy in the name of capitalism has given it a black eye. You know, there are real problems in this country, and I'm very sympathetic with people on the left who point out some real problems. Now, racism isn't one of them. Let's forget about that. But there are a lot of problems. They're not because of racism. They're because of too much government, right? And those problems are real. And I want those problems solved. But I understand that the solutions that everybody has, we're going to make them much worse. And the way we're going to finance it, by printing money. See, we can pretend that we're going to tax the rich. That's not going to work. You know, we've tried to tax the rich before. In fact, people don't know this. The only reason we have an income tax is because we were going to tax the rich in 1913. And the government told the public, if we have an income tax on Rockefeller and Carnegie and Vanderbilt, and it was only going to be like 2%, tiny, little teeny tax, the government said, we'll eliminate tariffs. That's why we had an income tax, to get rid of tariffs, because tariffs were paid by the average American. I mean, people back in 1913 were smart enough to know that consumers paid tariffs. I mean, Donald Trump is trying to pretend that the Chinese pay his tariffs. They don't. Americans pay every tariff that Trump has imposed. They're a tax on Americans. That's what they are. What Woodrow Wilson said was, hey, let's tax the rich with an income tax, and we can eliminate these tariffs that the average people are paying. And we made that deal. But now, average Americans are paying income taxes at levels far higher than anything contemplated for Vanderbilt and Rockefeller and Carnegie. So look, taxing the rich doesn't work, right? And you know what? A lot of the wealth that Bernie Sanders, and I know you had him on the show, and but a lot of the wealth that his ilk wants to tax is going to be destroyed by the very taxes that they want to impose. And they're not going to collect anywhere near the revenue that they think they're going to get. Instead, everything is going to cost much more than they think, and they're going to have to pay for it by printing money. And they're going to destroy the value of the currency. The war on drugs is a failure. In a free society, people have a right to consume what they want to consume.
Of course.
Right?
Especially
if they want to do drugs, let them do drugs, right?
Yeah.
And even if those drugs are harmful, adults can make decisions and deal with the consequences of their decisions.
Especially when legal alternatives are just as bad.
Whenever something is illegal, it's much more expensive than it would be if it were legal. And now you create this huge profit opportunity for criminals to come in and fill that demand, because people still want the drugs. They just can't buy them legally through a reputable source. The only way they can get them is, illegally through a criminal.
So this is the best example of what we've created in Mexico. The best example of that.
But then, as far as if you've got a lot of poor people, why are people poor, right? They're poor because they don't have the skills, or they can't earn enough money. They're not productive enough to generate income, above the poverty line. So if you have people who are poor, the way to make them less poor is to increase their productivity, right? One way, obviously, is through education when they're young. But I don't think government education is the solution, because I don't think government education is educating anybody. I think government schools are run for the benefit of the bureaucracy, of the school districts, of the teachers' unions. I want free enterprise. I want vouchers or private schools to compete for educational dollars, just the way, the cell phone companies are competing. They want me to buy their cell phone instead of somebody else's. They have to make it better, and they have to make it less expensive. So let's have schools that are competing to be the best, to offer the best education at the best value. And we've got in these cities, we've got these poor kids trapped in these failed government schools. They waste their time. They learn nothing. A lot of these kids graduate. They're not even literate. I mean, they can't even do basic arithmetic.
If you have a guy who's in a lower income family and he has a 7-year-old son, and that kid is going to school right now, like how do you fix that right now? By making it an open, free market. If we had
private schools, the kid could go there.
They couldn't afford that.
Right?
What if they couldn't afford the private school?
Private schools, for people who are really poor, private schools would give out scholarships to kids that have a lot of potential and their parents don't have the money. But when the private sector educates kids, it's cheaper.
Lot of potential, a lot of potential. That bothers me, because what if a kid doesn't have a lot of potential? Then he doesn't get an education because he can't afford a private school.
Not everybody. Let's say a kid doesn't have a lot of potential. a certain type of education might be a waste.
Yeah,
that
but when
kid
the kid's
might
7,
be better off learning a trade.
Hold on,
he might be better off learning how to do something.
How would you know?
Learn a trade.
How would you know while the kid is 7? If the kid's in first grade and is 7, how do you know whether or not that kid has a lot of potential? That's crazy.
Yeah, 7 is, I don't know, 7 might be a little young.
How old
I think
before you pull the plug on that kid?
The tuition in first or second grade is probably going to be less than in high school. Because in order to teach a second grader, the teacher doesn't have to know as much as a teacher needs to know to teach a 10th grader. So you wouldn't have to pay a second grade teacher as much as a 10th grade teacher. See, the problem in the government is everybody get paid the same, whether they're a lousy teacher or a good teacher, whether they're teaching a first grader or a high school. It's just all based on seniority. It's a crazy crackpot system that only the government could devise. And it's only because they have a captive audience. The customers don't have a choice. And the parents aren't even involved. If the parents were actually writing a check and paying for the education, they would make sure the kids did the homework. They would make sure they were getting their money's worth. When you get it for free, I mean, you just, take it for granted. So we need real education for the kids that can benefit from it. We need to get rid of minimum wage law and all sorts of occupational licensing laws and other things that the government does that prevent people from getting jobs or starting businesses. The government is creating all sorts of barriers, artificial barriers that would not exist absent government, right? Like you have a government. Let's say if you want to be a florist, a lot of these states, they have licenses. You have to get a license to sell flowers. Why? Why can't I just buy flowers from whoever I want? I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen to me? I buy flowers from a guy that doesn't know what he's doing. I get a lousy arrangement, and so I don't go back. Does the government have to protect me from getting a bad floral arrangement? Well, let the free market sort it out. If a guy's no good, he won't have any customers. But we make it a lot harder. There's all kinds of regulations and rules and permits. Just let people go into business. Poor people can start businesses if we didn't make it so expensive and so hard. And if they can flourish in the marketplace, if they can find customers, then great. If they're no good at what they do, they're not going to have any customers. The government has crippled so many people that they think they need a government crutch. That's an old Harry Brown quote that he ran for Libertarian president. He said the government is great at crippling you and then handing you a crutch and saying, you see, without me, you couldn't walk. So many people have been crippled and they think they need that government crutch. I don't want them to be crippled. I want them to walk on their own, right? To be free. I wish, we had the 4th of July just recently and, we celebrate America. And I talked on my old podcast, about what it means to be an American. And people just don't appreciate what truly America was all about, right? It's about freedom. It's about liberty and individual opportunity. It's about being left alone from government and being able to achieve all that you can achieve without anybody standing in your way, without anybody erecting a roadblock. And we created government in America. Government didn't create us. We didn't have a king that gave us some privileges. We started off as free people, and we ceded some of our sovereignty to a government to secure and protect our rights. And that's it. And that's what made Americans rugged individuals, right? Who were not beholden or begging from government, right? They took care of themselves, and they took care of their neighbors if their neighbor really needed help. It wasn't about thief. It wasn't about trying to get free stuff from the government. I mean, look at all these kids now. What do they want? Free this, free healthcare, free education, all kinds of free stuff, right? Free housing, free guaranteed jobs. That's not what America was about. All of my grandparents, right? All 4 of my grandparents came to this country broke, barely spoke any English, right? Some of them were teenagers. They came with nothing from poor countries, and they came to America. They had no welfare, no food stamps, no minimum wage. They didn't want anything from the government. They came to America because they could be free of government. They left the big governments that existed in Europe to have American freedom, right? Because that's what it meant to be an American. And it was unique. And we created the wealthiest society in the history of the world because of the freedom that was uniquely American, right? So that's what we need to restore. That's our birthright. Right, is to be free, not to try to get the government to steal stuff from our neighbors because we think we're entitled to it.
Human beings in general have a problem when they have power over other human beings. And if that power is absolute, like the power of the government, if that power is absolute, like the power of the police, if that power is absolute, that's where people have a problem. Because human beings, just in general, have a problem with having absolute power over other people.